Welcome to the Perfectly Honest Podcast with Michael and Kiahna. We are here to discuss life's everyday circumstances from the perspective of an everyday couple. That's us. If I'm being perfectly honest, the world is challenging our righteous desires to become better men and women. With Christ, we believe it's possible to overcome the world, live intentionally, and experience joy. So, let's jump right in to this week's episode. Welcome to the Perfectly Honest Podcast. My name is Michael, and I'm here with my wife, Kiahna.
Hey, guys.
Hi. So we're really excited to get started with this podcast. Kiahna and I have been talking about it for about a week.
And here we are, starting the dang thing. So That's good.
Yep. So we kind of wanted to just introduce ourselves in a couple of ways. First things first, we wanted to introduce who we are, each other personally, and then we wanted to talk about what our purpose is here in doing this podcast. So let's take it away.
Yeah, let's get started. So I can introduce you first.
Yeah.
Okay, so a little bit about Michael. His hobbies. Michael is really good at Minecraft. We'll probably have to link his Minecraft YouTube channel in the show notes.
If you're into that.
And he's got this knack for computer and audio gear, which I think is really cute. And then he also loves backpacking and music. So I feel like that sums you up pretty well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much.
Some skills that Michael has. He's a very techie boy. That's what I have written down. He's a techie boy, and he's good at organizing. Some things that impresses me about Michael is his ability to share his talents. He's really good at knowing what he's good at and then offering his services to other people. I think that is something that a lot of us are lacking in. It's hard to share our talents. It's hard to put ourselves out there. He's got the biggest heart, and he's an amazing father and husband.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
I love that.
Okay. Now, first opinion.
Oh, honest first opinion.
Did you skip that one?
I actually forgot, but I can offer that. How did I miss that?
I don't know.
I feel like it was just like in between stuff. We have a little outline.
Here,
that
do you want to go about hobbies and skills and what impresses?
Yeah, let's do that, and then let's do our first impressions.
We'll have
I feel like you just I was just nervous getting started, as I always am with recording, but I feel like you just put me at ease by talking about all the good things about
Oh, good.
And you're so natural at this. Okay. So Kiahna's hobbies.
Kiahna's hot.
Yeah.
That's what I heard.
I accidentally said Kiahna's hobbies. Hobbits. Okay, so her hobbies are cooking and baking. And that's it. No,
That's all she does.
No, she loves doing cooking and baking. Dance as well is one of her hobbies, and she's doing that at college right now. Being with friends, driving with music, listening to music.
Yeah,
That's
a good hobby.
Yep. Adventures. We go on adventures. And I feel like that just is a lot. I feel like that hobby is like a big like part of you. It's just you want to do like fun stuff.
That's so sweet.
Like picnics and at least you just love it. I love how you light up with that. And then the biggest one of all is reading, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Over cooking?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like it could be either way.
Honestly, if I could just go sit in a cabin all day by fire and read, I probably would.
I think if you could read while you have cookies in the oven.
Oh, that's a dream.
Yeah. Okay, and then skills, cooking and baking. So not only does she like to do it, she's actually really good at it.
What a relief.
Yeah. Also, listening is a skill, nurturing, and positivity.
Aw, those are so much better than the ones that I had written down for you.
No, I mean, they are better than any skills that I have. That's true. Okay, so, and then the ways that she impressed me, and then this is also just, I mix this with what I love about you too. She can she can love regardless of the circumstances. She's always kind, tender heart, always puts others first, and drop dead gorgeous.
Oh, that is so sweet. I'm going to start crying.
Don't cry on the podcast, please.
That'd be so embarrassing. Okay, first opinion of each other.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote down, so cute, all caps, exclamation mark. I thought Michael was the cutest boy I'd ever seen. And then he started talking, and he just got the best smile, a really warm presence, and he was such a good listener. And I think the biggest thing that I remember about the first time we met was my soul just went like, hey, I know you. And I've known you for a long time, even though we just met. So yeah, that was my first impression.
That's so sweet. Kiahna knows my first impression of her. I walked in the room to, do we want to go into the story?
I think we'll save that for another episode because that could be a whole.
But just to give a tiny bit of context, I was getting ready. We had just got up to college, and I was getting ready in the back. And so all my friends were already out there. Everybody was already in the living room. So she had been invited over by her roommate, who was friends with my roommate.
Shout out to Noelle if you're listening to this.
Yeah. And shout out Noelle. And I walked into the room and I just thought, she is so hot. That was my thing. I was like, she's hot. But then also, this is what I was thinking in my mind. I thought, she's way too hot. I'm probably just going to kiss her. And then, like that's going to be that because since she's so hot, she probably doesn't have a personality, like that whole thing. So, but then, we got talking and I feel like we didn't really talk for a day or two. Like we kind of had some conversation, but then it was like a day or two after that. I was like, oh my goodness, she's so sweet and so perfect.
Stop.
I mean, she's not perfect, but she is to me.
Oh, that's sweet.
She is for me.
Oh, okay. So why we love the other person. You kind of already said yours.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm going to just hype you up a little bit more before we get into the deep stuff of the podcast.
Yep.
So I love Michael because he's my best friend, adventure buddy, and he's a doer. I tell him all the time, he's the type of person that you say you want to do something and then he makes it happen. He just makes my dreams come true. So ladies, find yourself a man like that.
But, don't let that fool you. I am also very lazy.
We're going to cut that out of the podcast.
No. I guess hence why we talked about this last week.
And now we're doing it.
Yeah. Just, that's how I like to do things all at once. So whether that's for good or not. So, okay. So, let's talk about, why are we here? Mm-hmm. Right. One, a podcast is really fun to do. Yes. And, we should do this. We should just talk like this more often. We should just build each other up like this more often. It feels pretty good.
It feels really good.
This is just really sweet to talk anyway. But what's our why? Kiahna, what's our why?
So I think a big why we have is to bring people to Christ, to share our light and help people discover more of their light. And to help them understand that as they're honest with themselves and honest to God, that they can get through their hardships and that they can grow to be better people.
Right. Now, I do want to say, with that, just to let you know, our religious affiliation, right?
Oh, yeah.
As we should. Mm-hmm. We're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Many people know us as the Mormons, but we'll tell you that we are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And we don't want it to be any, exclusive to any specific group. We hope that, we don't speak for the church, but we hope that we just speak more personally about our experiences with Christ. Mm-hmm. And even if you're not Christian, hopefully, for you, it can mean something spiritually, or even not. You could just listen to the first half of the podcast and then cut out the last.
Yeah, and to go along with that, we will be referencing scripture from the Bible and from the Book of Mormon, and we'll probably link how you can have access to the Book of Mormon online for free.
Yeah,
if you want to follow along at home.
Absolutely. So, but yeah, it's just don't feel excluded if you're not catching up with our lingo on that kind of stuff, because once again, our main goal is to bring you to Christ, and not necessarily to say we have one right way and like that's it, even though we believe very firmly in our faith, as should you. Okay, so what else? Let's talk about men and women.
Yeah.
I'm a man and Kiahna's
I'm a woman. Yeah. And we're different. And okay, listen, ladies, we're in a world where there's a lot of voices encouraging women to chase after career goals and different dreams, which are all fine and dandy. But I feel like we have kind of been missing out on the girls that want to stay home and be moms. And I'm one of those girls. And I feel like I would have loved if there's someone maybe a little older than me telling me, hey, it's okay to want to be a homemaker and a mom and a wife. And so that's part of our purpose here, is to build women up and help them realize their different goals and what they can achieve, but also that one of their most important jobs is in the home. Right. And there is no shame in that. That is a hard job. Yeah,
no shame at all in doing a very difficult task. And then to men as well, I would say that in today's world, I have never seen men more under attack. And you don't really hear that. That's not what pops up on the news all the time. And that's okay. But I feel, and this is just my feeling and opinion, and I think Kiahna is with me on this, but men are being undermined by society in a way that's saying that it's not good to be a man, that men are inherently evil, being a manly man is not a good thing. Now it's like there's all sorts of different types of men. I wouldn't call myself a manly man, but there are important things to manhood. So I hope we can talk about that. But most importantly, I want men to find joy in being a good man. I think we need more good men in the world. And that's true. There are bad men out there. And, that's why I think we talk about it a lot extensively. But I hope that people listening to this podcast will want to be a better man.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. Okay, that's it for today's podcast.
Okay, bye guys.
Just kidding. We've got a little bit more. Okay, let's see. I think we pretty much covered. I mean, that's mostly our why there.
Yeah.
As far as like content that you could expect to hear from us, we're going to be going over all sorts of stuff. That's not all of it. We're going to be hopefully going over some parenting. We are parents of a little baby boy, Coleman, who's almost 1 year old.
Woo woo!
Yeah.
We've almost survived a year.
Yeah, almost survived a year. So we've got to make it 2 more weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 more weeks. So yeah, hopefully you guys will enjoy hearing us in that journey. And we're no professionals at this, at parenting, at life. I think my motivation somewhat in doing the podcast is because I'm so bad at a lot of things in life. And I think that this will help me be better.
Help us learn and verbalize what we're learning. Right.
Yeah, exactly. I shouldn't be so hard on myself. Yeah. Oh. Because, then that's going to make Kiahna look bad. Like she picked a horrible man. Just kidding.
But also we're just going to be sharing a lot of like personal experiences and stories. Right. We're hoping to have some other friends, family, people on the podcast that we think are cool. So yeah, it's just going to be a lot about our different life experiences. and how we got through them, how we're still working through them, and how God has helped us on that journey. So
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then why the name Perfectly Honest? The Perfectly Honest podcast. So we actually chose this name from one of my favorite scriptures, and it actually does come from the Book of Mormon. And just to give some context here, this is a people called the Anti-Nephi Lehis. Not important to remember for right now, but they were a people who went from being very wicked to being very, very good. And this is a description about them. And we'll kind of tell you why we picked this phrase. But it says, and they were among the people of Nephi and also numbered among the people who were of the church of God. And they were also distinguished for their zeal towards God and also towards men. For they were perfectly honest and upright in all things. And they were firm in the faith of Christ, even unto the end. And I think that's just a really cool description of a type of people that I would love to be like. I mean, could you imagine just an entire group of people who were perfectly honest and upright in all things? You know, like I feel like I don't know anybody, not within the church or anywhere.
Yeah.
But it was kind of funny because we chose that phrase because we're like, oh, it's kind of like a saying too, like, oh, if I'm being like perfectly honest.
Well, what's funny is when he first read that scripture to me out loud, I was like, oh, firm in the faith, that should be the name of the podcast. He's like, no, perfectly honest. And I was like, oh yeah, that's funny, I like it.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, talk show host, they're gonna be honest, you know, just chatting. So
but yeah, so perfectly honest, like we kind of said before, you got to be honest with yourself. If you are seeking to improve or if you want to overcome anything. And it's helpful to be honest with God too.
Right.
In overcoming hardship.
Being honest with yourself is really important. And we're going to just talk about today. Our topic that we decided on was vulnerability and connection. At the very least, I decided on it. I just wrote it down and Kiahna said, okay.
I said, that sounds good.
Yeah. So, you know, being honest with yourself, as we're going to just talk about today, is so important if you ever want to see any real change in your life. You know, and we don't really like, Kiahna and I haven't really been on social media a lot, honestly, for like a year?
Yeah.
For like a long time.
At
it just
least a
didn't
year.
appeal. Like I got rid of mine for a little while and then I was like, I do not miss it at all. So I just kind of got rid of it. So, but that was one of those things that was like, I didn't look at others who were not using social media because everyone on social media is using social media.
Yeah.
So it's just, you know, our thing isn't about looking at others and seeing like how perfect their life is and trying to make change bases on that, you know, but like looking at the changes you actually do want for yourself in your life.
Yeah.
You know, and going for that. And that starts with honesty. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, so how do you see honesty playing into vulnerability and connection?
Yeah. So this was my thought today as I was like doing a little bit of study on vulnerability. I was thinking of vulnerability as somewhat of a subcategory of honesty because I feel like it fits within honesty. But it doesn't like describe all of honesty altogether. And the reason for that being is vulnerability is basically saying, I'm willing to be open. I'm willing to get hurt possibly, to accept the truth or to allow myself to be emotionally available for somebody or to be able to let yourself emotionally give up some things and have someone else help you. So I think it's one of those like first steps to like being able to accept truth. If you have a hard time with being open.
Yeah. You have to be vulnerable in your relationships. I mean, it's one thing to be vulnerable with yourself and with the Lord, but it's completely something different to be vulnerable in your marriage or in your friendships, whatever relationship you have. So that's something that we've been learning in our first couple years of marriage a lot, is that being vulnerable can be really hard.
Yeah.
But it is so necessary for connection. Like, if you want to truly connect with others, you have to be willing to put your walls down and share what's really going on inside.
Right. Right. And I'll be the first to say too that, and I chose this topic because I am really bad with vulnerability. Right?
Yes, he is. But we're working on it.
Yeah. No, I really struggle with it. I mean, just being open about anything, you know, I would say even good and bad. I mean, sometimes there's great experiences that happen to me, and I'll eventually tell Kiahna about it. And she's like, what? You should have told me all about it. I'm like, yeah, but I just like keeping to myself. I like my corner. You know, so it's really tough. And especially for like the hard things, you know, the things that are embarrassing. That's really tough. If you do something that's embarrassing, it's hard, you know, in whatever situation that is, you know, whether it's how you treated somebody at work or, you know, whatever. It's just
you say
hard.
something dumb.
Yeah. You just say something stupid and you're like, I'd rather not talk about it. Sometimes it's good just to throw it out there. It becomes a lot easier to deal with. It's hard. There will be a lot of tears sometimes, you know, but you know, truthfully, it's a lot better to be honest with your spouse.
Yeah.
So, and it takes being honest with yourself first, being vulnerable with yourself, just to the extent where you're like, okay, this is honestly what happened. You know, to me, you know, this was a hard experience. I got overstressed with work, instead of just like coming home and bottling that up and like playing video games and trying to like distract the whole way.
Yeah.
You know, it's
because then you're missing out on these bids for connection. And that's what we all want in life, is to feel connected to others. I feel like that could be a big definition of love, is like being connected to someone. So.
Yeah. And and I'm not knocking on video games just to, I love them. I mean, I'm playing Minecraft on posting on YouTube. So, but it's like, but there's a time and a place.
Yeah.
When I'm trying to distract myself is not the time. You know, that's the time to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Just recognizing when you're putting up walls. I feel like that is the first step to being vulnerable, is noticing when, oh, I'm a little closed off right now. Like, why is that? Why am I feeling like scared to share this thing with someone else? Right.
Right. What would you say your experience has been, Kiahna, with me? Do you feel like it's hard to, it's been hard at sometimes to be vulnerable with me, or do you think that it's been pretty easy?
I think that we struggle with being vulnerable about different things. Okay. Like, you struggle with being vulnerable about things that maybe you're embarrassed about.
Yeah.
And I struggle with being vulnerable about like judgmental thoughts or like unhappy thoughts I have about our relationship.
Right.
And so I feel like it's really come and gone in waves. Like, we will have this breakthrough conversation and it's like, oh, we're so close. I feel so close to you. We're just being so vulnerable. And then a week later, you realize the walls kind of came back up. How did that happen? And how do we break those down? And it's been hard when I've been like, hey, like, what's really going on in your life? And you're like, I'm good. Everything's okay.
No, that's my way of like shutting her out. Is like, maybe if I tell her everything's fine, then it'll be okay. So
until we reach that next breakthrough conversation where it's like, oh, the walls came down. Why don't we just live every day like this?
Right. Exactly. I don't know what really, I mean, we've talked about things that we've thought have caused that, you know, you know, and it could be how, you know, we're raised to some extent. But it could be a lot of different factors, you know. I mean, I don't know. It could be how I was treated in school in the second grade, you know.
Yeah, honestly.
So, you know, but whatever the reason is, what helps mend it, like the more I talk with Kiahna, and sometimes it'd be like, we would have walls up. I feel like in the first year, it'd be like walls up for months.
Mm-hmm.
And now I feel like it's like a week to week basis at least.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree.
And a big part of that is college. Like, because we just moved up here from California. And we've been doing a lot better with like scripture study and prayer and like reading with each other and like doing things with each other.
Yeah.
Even just little things. And it's caused us to be close in a way where it's like, oh, I need to talk to Kiahna about this because she's my best friend, you know, rather than like, oh man, I need to tell my mom that, you know, that like, you know,
I pooped my pants.
Yeah, that I pooped my pants. It's, yeah. So, or I put coins in the VCR or whatever.
That's a classic Michael move.
Yeah, or M&Ms. I think that was what I did, was M&Ms in the VCR. Even worse than coins.
Yeah.
Those things heat up.
Melt.
They melt into
VCR is done.
All the cracks. Okay, so I actually had one thing on vulnerability. And for a second, I want you to think,
okay,
listeners. Well, and Kiahna.
I was like, I'm closing my eyes. I'm thinking.
Yeah. But I already kind of went through this with you, so. But when you think of the word vulnerable, what's the first word that comes to your head? And I might have already ruined this because we've said some like words like, you know, honesty. So you might think like, oh, that's what he's going for is honesty. It's not actually.
Wrong.
Yeah. When I think of vulnerable, and this was just, you know, and this might be coming from like an embarrassment standpoint, but exposed is what would you think, Kiahna, like the first thing you think of when I say vulnerable? Yeah.
I think of a baby, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like innocence?
Like all of their needs, all of their emotions are on the surface.
Right.
We've really been experiencing that with Coleman recently.
Yeah, we have.
He's just been very expressive, but I feel like that's what I think of. Just a baby. Whatever they want, need, feel, they let you know.
Yeah. They're pretty good at being vulnerable. They don't bottle things up.
Yeah. They don't know how to not be vulnerable.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's really interesting. I just wanted to know, to be honest. We have our baby monitor, so every now and then I'm checking it, but I'm sure.
Oh, my eyes are glued to the screen.
Yeah. So we have to do this at night because we have a baby who has to sleep for about an hour while we do this. So yeah, when I think of vulnerable, I think of exposed, and I thought of those as like synonyms. But then I thought, okay, if there is a difference, what is that? So I looked up some definitions today. I want you guys to hear these. And this is just dictionary.com. This isn't anything special. But here's the definitions I found. Vulnerable, openness or susceptibility to attack or harm. Mm. And then number 2, and I like this definition better, willingness to show emotion or to allow one's weakness to be seen or known. Willingness to risk being emotionally hurt. Mm. Now, the definition of exposed is not covered or hidden, visible. So to me, vulnerability kind of had just one step more. And you could say a lot of this about exposed. You could say, you know, that in weakness, you're exposed. Like if you're seen in your weakness, you're exposed, you know, or emotionally hurt, you're exposed, you know, whatever that is. But I feel like the vulnerability was this willingness to be exposed.
Mm. Well, I think vulnerability also has that layer of emotion. When I think of exposed, I think, oh, your actions are seen or you got caught in the act. But vulnerability has that like emotional connection and being able to talk about what's happening on the inside, not just what you see.
Right, exactly. Like, for example, in the news, like you'll see like, oh, such and such celebrity was exposed. Exposed, scandal, whatever, right? But you don't hear, they were vulnerable.
That'd be kind of weird.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like if they do say that, it's usually like this either coming out moment or like they're expressing an emotion. They're say, yeah, such and such was vulnerable, you know, about this about their feelings on
Yeah.
this specific issue, whatever. So, I just love that definition of, being being willing to expose yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, you get to choose who you're vulnerable to.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So whether that's to yourself, to God, to your spouse, I totally believe this is there are things that you should just keep between you and your spouse,
Mm-hmm.
or just keep to yourself and God until you find a spouse.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's an okay thing. Now, if you're struggling with, something like that thing that you're keeping to yourself is causing you to not work effectively in life, then that's maybe when you need to get professional help.
Yeah.
Right at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, there might be like, I don't know, just something that you're like, this is between me and my spouse. And especially the love that you have for your spouse and expressing all of that,
Mm-hmm.
it's really important to keep some things just between you and your spouse.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not preaching to be vulnerable with the whole world. You don't have to tell everyone your deepest, darkest secrets.
Yeah. And you could be, but it's your choice.
That'd be a fun little experiment.
Right. Yeah.
Go around and tell your secrets to everyone for a whole day.
I know. Yeah, exactly. So, well, actually, this is a funny point. Sorry, I'm talking way too much.
No, I like it. Keep going.
Okay. I find it a lot easier for myself to be vulnerable with somebody that I know I will never see again. So like, there's been times when I've like worked with somebody and I'm like, okay,
let me
like,
tell you my life story.
Like, I don't know if you started a job and someone's like, oh, this is my last day because you're like replacing that person. Like I've had that happen before, and then we just like talk, and I'm just like, I feel like so open with them because I'm like, they can know all of this stuff and they don't care about me. They're just going to forget it. They don't know any of my friends.
So what you're saying is sometimes it's harder to be vulnerable with the people that you know are going to be sticking around.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think has been some of my struggle, with being vulnerable with you, maybe that, just comes from like, I don't know, maybe some insecurities, right? From like being in high school and like having friends that I wanted to talk to and family. And then maybe they were doing their best, but for whatever reason, I was struggling to, just because I was like, they're going to just stick around. They're going to stick around.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, here's some thoughts that I had that I wanted to make sure I mentioned. We should be vulnerable with ourselves first, for others that we should be, depending on what the situation is. And just remember that, that helps overcome embarrassment. You're not going to overcome your embarrassment by just letting it fester inside you.
Right.
The other thing I wanted to mention was to stay safe, we distance ourselves from others and we close ourselves off. So, so we're basically like, if we're like, I don't really want to be outwardly embarrassed, I'd rather just hold on to that. You kind of just say like, I mean, to me, I'm like, I don't want to make eye contact.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk for too long, because if we talk for too long, then I'm going to talk about what I'm holding on to. I'm embarrassed that I got so angry at work or whatever,
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's kind of a good segue into what I wanted to talk about next. Because what you're saying is we stay in the safe spot because we want to preserve our self-image and how we appear to other people. And that's kind of a pride issue. Right. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that we're so concerned about how we come across to others. And then it makes it so that we are lacking in connection. But something that I've been learning a lot about in my scripture study and even in some of my classes, actually, is the importance of humility, which is kind of the opposite of pride, right? It's how we fight against pride, how we can find peace in being honest about our issue with pride.
Right.
So once we recognize, I kind of have an issue with pride, and I am just so concerned about how I come across to others. Once we notice that, we're honest about it, then we can do something about it.
Right, exactly. So maybe like an example, to kind of like, just as I thought while you were saying that, was in my, like, what I find myself struggling with pride is that I'm okay doing things by myself. Like I can take care of myself.
Mm-hmm.
I can, hold on to, whatever thing I'm struggling with. Like I can just hold on to that and like not worry about, like someone else taking on the burden.
Yeah.
Right. But that's the humility that you need, is to be able to say, like, I'm willing to talk to you,
Yeah.
like I'm willing to have that conversation because it's good for me, but it's good for both of us.
Yeah.
If I hold everything to myself, that's prideful. And prideful just kind of does this thing that causes damage around.
Yeah, it's right. A lot of people's downfall.
Yeah.
And so something I've been learning about humility is just the importance of recognizing that we are all equals.
Right.
None of us are better than anyone else. And that we are all very dependent on God for everything.
Yeah.
Everything we have, everything we do, everything we are is because of him.
Right.
And or whatever higher power you believe in, the universe, whatever it may be. So when we are able to step back and realize that we're not insignificant, but we are equal with each other.
Right.
I think that helps us step out of our pride bubble and be honest with each other.
Yeah.
And something else that I really liked, this is from Dieter F. Uchtdorf. He said, "We don't discover humility by thinking less of ourselves. We discover humility by thinking less about ourselves." So humility isn't about tearing yourself down in order to be this humble, lowly person so that you can be happy. No, it's about placing your confidence and self-esteem in the Lord and going to serve other people. That's what it means to be humble.
Right, exactly. Something to, that just kind of reminds you to be humble. And if you're okay with me sharing this personal experience about what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
But I don't have a job, which gives me the time to start this podcast and do some stuff, which is really great because as we have been up here, I mean, we had a little bit of money, but we basically we kind of had nothing. We moved up and we spent a lot of our money to like be able to get here, to this point where we are now. And then we had some money coming from school, and that money, and I said this to Kiahna a little while ago, but that money has been like the loaves and the fishes from the Bible. If you remember that story, where it just seems like it is going down, it is running out, but it just seems like it just keeps on going. We're like, oh man, like, do we have enough in there? And then we look and we're like, we
have a lot more than we thought we did.
Yeah. So, in humility, we recognize, humility in some ways is honestly recognizing what the situation is.
Yeah.
It's recognizing truth.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, like you said, putting yourself down and hurting yourself, or being hard on yourself.
Yeah.
That's not humility. That is prideful. Hurting yourself when God sent you here to find joy.
Yeah. Well, because you're making it all about you again.
Yeah.
And that's not why we're here. We're here to live our own lives.
Right.
And be our own people, but we're here to love other people.
Exactly. And I'm saying this in a non-judgmental way. Like, I am really hard on myself too, but I'm just saying that we need to come together, all of us need to recognize our pride and just say, hey, it's time for us to find joy.
Totally.
In the little things, don't be so hard.
Yeah. Love it. Okay. What has God been teaching you this week?
So something that I really loved, I actually I read this last week, but then I reread it again today, and I was like, oh my goodness, that is an awesome verse to kind of relate to what we're talking about today. This is from John chapter 1, and we've been going through the New Testament recently. John chapter 1, verses 11 through 13, if you want to follow along. And it says, he came unto his own, and his own received him not. This is talking about Jesus Christ. But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name, which were born not of blood, nor of the will of flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And so basically, it's saying, like, if you cut out some of that, a lot, it was saying, like, not born this way or this way or this way. They do that a lot in the scriptures. But if you basically say, power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name, which were born of God, right? So it's just those, we are all sons and daughters of God. But this was saying a specific blessing was that he gave them power to be spiritually born of God. Now, reversing back to verse 11, it says he came unto his own, and his own received him not. And to me, just in this instance, I mean, there's a lot you can say about this verse, but as I was thinking about vulnerability, I just thought about how Christ came and gave himself, right? And just kind of like in a type of way, when we give ourselves to him, he will accept us. But also as kind of a reversal, he gave himself to his own, and they rejected him, right? His own received him not. And I just thought about, how emotionally hard that would be for Christ in the flesh to experience. But I think that he knew, thinking of all of us, that, he needed to show us that he was willing to be there for us. He'll being vulnerable with us, showing us we should be vulnerable first with him. Right?
Oh, I love that connection.
Yeah. I mean, because if we expose ourselves to God, then, he's a safe place.
Yeah,
for us.
he's always there with open arms. And I love that Christ made an example of himself and that he faced rejection, and yeah, he was not received of his own. People rejected him in the flesh, and there will be people that reject us because of our ideas or vulnerability on certain topics. And that's okay, because we always have God.
Yeah.
In his open arms.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is being the Perfectly Honest podcast, we wanted to be very transparent with who we were, because we thought that's the way that we could be most helpful to you, right? Whether you stand with our beliefs or not, we hope that you can find something in this, and even if you just want to learn, like, oh, that's what a couple of Christians think, about this specific situation. At least our bias, who we are. We do have our opinions, but we have an ultimate goal, which is the strengthening of men and women and bringing people to Christ.
Yeah.
I wanted to say one other thing too. I was just kind of thinking about like reflective parenting, because as I was looking up some stuff online today, I saw a couple of things. I wish I kind of jotted down where like I saw these things, but it seemed to, over the course of a lot of websites I went to when I looked about vulnerability in parenting, they all basically agreed in that if you're vulnerable with your kids, they're more likely to be vulnerable with you. And I thought about that in the scope of this verse too, because Christ was basically showing us that if he can be vulnerable with us, we'll be more vulnerable with him. And I think that's really important, to be vulnerable with your kids. It doesn't mean that you're telling them all of your secrets.
No.
Maybe you're not even telling them all the hard things. Depending on their age, you might not even tell them about like certain things that are happening in the world, because, that might be scary to them. But you can relate experiences to them still that have impact, and just say, hey, I want to always be open with you, so that we can just talk.
Yeah.
You know, like, be a safe place for each other.
Well, and I mean, we have an almost 1-year-old, and I've seen you practice vulnerability with him by just apologizing when you lose maybe your patience with him or with a situation.
Yep.
And he doesn't necessarily understand apology, but we're starting him young.
Exactly. It's starting to sound from this podcast like I'm a very angry person. I think as a kid I was, and then parenting has brought out my impatience.
Well, and I'm vulnerable with Coleman, and I cry in front of him, but then he laughs because he's a baby and he doesn't know what crying crying means.
The other day I was changing his diaper, and while I was changing, sorry for this graphic content here. This has to do with a dirty diaper.
So just skip forward 15 seconds if you don't like dirty diapers.
Or a minute. I'm going to go on. I'm just kidding. Yeah, he was like, I want to spank my bum while it's poopy down there. And I about lost it. I'm kind of a clean person. I just do not like that. And I was like, no, Coleman, don't do that. Don't, no. And I was losing it. And he looked at my face and just laughed. He thought it was so funny that I was overreacting to the whole thing. And then even afterwards, I was still like, hey, I'm sorry. I shouldn't, you know. And he's just looking at me like, I don't know what you're talking about, but that's okay.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah. So, you know, and not, I still think that I would rather not react in anger. I don't want that to be a habit, you know. And not like I was getting angry or mean with him, but definitely was frustrated. And it's funny how he's like laughing at that, because he's like, I don't know what that means.
He laughs at everything.
Yeah.
I mean, parents of young babies know, like, when you're teaching them not to bite or hit, and you say, no, don't do that. And they're like, ha ha. And then they do it again.
Yeah. I've been trying to think about, like, what natural consequences can we give? My thing I've been trying to do that hasn't been working has been, if you scratch or bite or whatever, you don't get to be on the couch.
You have to sit on the floor.
So I, like, put him down for 2 seconds. He cries, and then I pick him back up. But yeah.
We're working on that. Once we find a solution, we'll let you know.
Yeah, we will. So it probably is going to be like, try not to say no, but try to say yes to another situation. So one thing that has worked, I'll say this. I know we're kind of going on a different tangent. Something that kind of has worked was I've been spending more time with him in the morning, and just gentle time, and not trying to rile him up, you know, because I like to give him lots of kisses and make him laugh. But something that's really nice, and he'll actually be gentle with me, more gentle, is if I spend good time with him. So
maybe we just answered our own question.
That's the answer.
He just needs more time.
He needs more attention.
More quality time and attention.
Yeah. Okay, so to kind of wrap up our podcast, something... and I actually hate saying that, kind of doing that. We are going to wrap up our podcast. But something that we want to do each week is we want to do a message to men and women. We kind of did that a little bit in the middle, but Kiahna's prepared a little message for women, and I've prepared a message for men. Yeah.
So I will take it away. Something that I've been talking about in one of my classes this week is how we live in a time of an anti-men culture. And I feel like Michael was kind of touching on that earlier, that there's just a lot of people hating on men. And granted, there are some bad men out there, but there are a lot of great men out there. And I think that our young boys in this world, the youth, and the men, they're all picking up on these messages that they are inherently bad for some reason, and that will cause them to behave in such a way that is maybe unproductive, or they're impatient or lash out, whatever it is. It's just creating this cycle. We hate on men, so they keep doing what they're doing, and it's things that we hate, and so we hate on them more. And I think that we need to stop that. So my message to women is that we need to love our husbands and our fathers and our brothers, and we need to cherish them and lift them up and be their biggest cheerleader, because they need our support right now. And the more that we love the men in our lives, the more I think that we will see real lasting change and be happier in our relationships.
Men are so important. They really are. Mm-hmm. Men and women are so important.
Equally important.
Yeah. And I wish that as a society, we could really see that. I hate seeing attacks on either side. To be honest too, even when I'm with, buddies who have an off comment about, women just because they think they're being funny. And that's how men are too sometimes, is they like to be funny and be kind of irreverent and stuff. But it makes me wince a little bit. I would like to see a higher respect, because we need it at a time like this in the world. I just want to give this message that you can be good if you want to. That men can be good if they really want to be. You don't have to be pigs. Now, I understand that there's some hard things in life, like fathers. If you have a tough situation with a father, that just does all sorts of things in your life. That can be really difficult. I think that good fathers are so important to produce, good kids. But we recognize that people listening to this aren't always going to have that situation, So just know that we recognize that, and that's why we think it's really important to change that, to move from that, to change that in society.
Change the narrative.
Yeah. And so here's a little bit more of what I wanted to say. Men, be honest with your spouses. Be open with your spouses. Every spouse is different. So, you might be struggling with something different. It could be like, pornography, or drug abuse, or, whatever it is. And your spouse might react different to, something like that than, maybe someone else's spouse. Like Kiahna is just perfectly accepting and amazing in every way, and I love her for that. But just know that honesty, it is not easy, but it determines a better path forward for you. Okay. And if you don't have a spouse, just be honest with yourself. Do inventory with yourself. Just make sure that you're not avoiding, what the hardness is in your life right now. Just take time to experience that. Like, go play a video game, or go play basketball, or go on a hike, or whatever it is that you need to do where you feel in your element, and do it with the purpose of, I want to think through what I need to think through. Right? And sorry, this is a little bit long-winded. But then of course, don't be hard on yourself. And being honest doesn't mean forming an opinion about what the situation is. It's about accepting the truth. And we have to accept the truth before we can take any action.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's my message.
Sweet.
So yeah, guys, that's going to conclude our episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Perfectly Honest Podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing and avoid the tragedy of missing out next week. And we will see you then.
Bye.
Bye.